Yep, it's true. The title is not lying to you. You guys have all been asking, and I finally arm wrestled this BBBC in so that we can tear it down on the channel. And I'm talking about the biggest big block Chevrolet, the 8.1 liter Vortec 8100, 496 cubic inches of raw American power, 340 horsepower, 450 foot-pounds of torque. I like these things. Not because I think they're amazing engines, but because it's just giant. It's cool. It makes all kinds of power. They sound fantastic. And they also run for a very long time. I've seen many of these engines over 500,000 miles, although I've also seen lots of bad ones, just not since I started this channel, which is why this is the very first 496 or 81 that I've got on the stand. So this one is supposed to be bad. It's a core return, which means a salvage yard sold a good engine and then required the old engine to come back for a partial refund. These are not super common to come around most of the yards I deal with because it's not a very common engine. It was a pretty expensive option and most people opted for the diesel if they needed to tow. But these tow just fine. All that torque down low is exactly where you want it in a truck. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to getting my hands on something like this. So let's figure out what happened to this one. The 8.1 replaced the 454 Vortec 7400. That is a good engine. This is just bigger, so it makes more power and torque. This engine came out for the 2001 model year in both the GMT 400s and the GMT 800s at the same time. Now the 400s that got this engine are only 1 tons, and there's only the last couple of years of that generation. Predominantly, you can find this engine starting in 2001 in the GMT 800s, the 3/4 and 1 ton Silverados and Sierras, all the way up to 2007 Classics. You can even get this in a Suburban or Yukon 2500, and they made an Avalanche with this engine, an Avalanche 2500. It's not that common, but people did buy them, and they didn't make an Escalade version, which is kind of sad, but I'm sure someone has built that at least once. And speaking of building things, these engines do not have the same aftermarket support that their smaller LS architecture brothers do. Those engines are very prevalent. They're offered in all kinds of different vehicles. These are heavy, they're all iron, and they're not that common, which is why I suspect there's not the aftermarket support. But there are a few companies that make some cool stuff, like aluminum heads and a bigger cam, and they sound awesome. There's no better way to say that. Normally, the first thing I do is try to turn this engine over, but I've got this giant fan in the way, so I've decided that I'm just going to remove the water pump. We're just going to get that out of the way so that I can get straight on the crank bolt. It'll be just a little bit easier that way. Oh, that might be all the bolts that are in it. Oh yeah, that's a heavy, very heavy leaking water pump.
This seems like a good spot to keep a water pump.
All right, that's much easier without the fan. So let's see if this thing turns over. Nope, I am turning the crank bolt. Let's go the other way. Not like that. Well, I successfully loosened the crank bolt. So I'm going to go with no, it does not turn over. Next, let's pull the plugs. There is some good news here. They are all the same type of plug, but they have the largest gap of any plug that I think I've ever pulled out of an engine on this channel. I could park a Miata in that gap, but I don't see anything smashed or bent. It does look like this thing was running pretty hot, judging by the color on a couple of these plugs. But none of them are oil fouled. Oh, that one's got some buildup on it. Yeah, look at that. Buildup on that thing. Yeah, these plugs are past their prime. Now I'm going to take a minute and strip the front of this engine. We'll get the power steering pump and bracket out of the way, this coolant crossover pipe out of the way, AC compressor bracket out of the way. It'll just make this a little bit easier. Okay, all the bolts are out. Now that's off. Did I miss one, or? Yes, I missed one. That's heavy. Next, we'll take the exhaust manifolds off. That broke. Now, if you notice, these exhaust manifolds have little slits cut in them, so that way heat cycles, these things can expand and contract without breaking exhaust manifold bolts.
LSs do that all the time.
That's fine. We're going to get these off. That broke. That didn't. That broke. Or like 50-50. Those aren't as heavy as I thought they'd be. Just like the LS's, I need to get the dipstick tube out of the way. I'm not ready for this. It's going to be fine. Think positive thoughts. It's going to be loose. Oh, it's loose. It's going to come out. See, I knew I liked these BBCs.
That's not what I meant.
Before I take the exhaust manifold bolts out, I need to unbolt the EGR pipe from the head. This is already loose, so someone's already had this part apart, which a lot of cores are like that. That's good enough. So far, so good. That was loose. Now it's time to remove the intake manifold. Now the oil-filled tube goes through the intake, and it probably got knocked around a little bit. It's broken, but it's not a big deal. It's an easily replaced part. So now we just have a bunch of bolts to take out. Okay, this should just lift straight up. That is very heavy for aluminum. Well, it smells bad. Let's just pull these intake gaskets off. How does a pine needle end up in there? And leaves? I don't see anything clean. I mean, I don't see anything broken or bent. But the mixture of fluid in the valley is kind of troublesome. Before we peel these valve covers off, one more bracket. It's time to peel off the valve covers. What's behind door number 1? Valve train. Well, I don't see anything. Okay, that seems excessive to me. There's also moisture in here, but that could be how this engine sat outside. This engine was outside. I don't know. I don't see any built up sparkles, but there's definitely some rust on the push rods. There's definitely some moisture in here. I wonder if it came from coolant or rainwater. Now, the other valve cover. All right, this is smelling pretty bad. It smells a lot like some of the flood engines we've done recently. And there's a lot of rust on this push rod here. I really hope this isn't a repeat of the last big block I did, because that one, that wore me out. I don't know if I have that in me tonight. But there's definitely some water in the oil, or maybe it's oil in the water, but it's in the crankcase. It's water in the oil. Doesn't look good, but I don't see anything bent. Here's a better look at what this looks like. This side isn't quite as bad, but there's still some rust on the valve springs. There should never be water in this part of the engine. This one's much worse. It still has water in here. There's rust on the push rods. It's clearly been wet. But I don't know if this one went swimming or, I don't know, maybe it was overheated. We'll have to keep digging. Let's get these rockers off so we can take a look at the push rods. Sorry, I don't mean to deprive you of the sound. So the rockers and push rods don't have any damage other than water damage. This bank isn't nearly as bad as the other side. We'll get to that in a minute, but I don't see any of the machine looked finished. The end of these are all shiny. So they were well oiled. I don't know if this thing suffered from oil pressure related issues, but I don't see any signs yet. This side though, a lot of rust. Push rods are not supposed to be in water or coolant or anything other than oil. I don't see anything bent, so that's a good sign. Well, this intake's definitely been off before. We knew that. The bolts are too loose. But there's a clip. There's a Schrader valve cap. Some more debris. So it has an odd line across that surface of the head. Nothing too bad there. Okay, that's bad. That's not good at all. Ugh. Rust. Now it's time to crack the head bolts loose. I don't know if these are going to be loud or not. Oh, they don't make any noise? Well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm probably just going to buzz these out. Yeah, no noise. I'll just hit the impact. That is a lot of head bolts. Now I understand these are iron heads. They're probably pretty heavy. So we're going to hope that this goes not sideways. Let's lock this up here. Might need blue for this. I'm going to thread one bolt in here, just in case this thing decides that it wants to take flight. I got all the bolts, right? That's very on there. Let me try something else. It's rubber. It's fine. All right, first look inside. Oh, that's ugly.
And it's heavy.
What is that? What kind of fungus among us is this? I don't want to touch that. Normally, I'm happy to stick my fingers in some. Wait, that sounds wrong. I'm happy to touch whatever's inside the engines, but not that. I'm not. I'll get a rag for that. But you can definitely tell there's some moisture sitting in there. That cylinder's rusty. These are not. We must do our test. Everything seems solid. Let's go look at that cylinder head. Well, the head still has the gasket on it, and I don't see anything that looks too bad. Let's see if we can get this off. I mean, this doesn't look terrible. That was clearly the cylinder that had water sitting in it for a long time. I don't see any other damage. And I think this head would probably clean up just fine. It may need a valve job from moisture sitting in the valve, on the valve seat and on the edge of the valve, but let's go get that other head off. I feel like that's going to be worse. Let's zip this one off. I'm going to thread this in a few threads, and then I'm going to do what worked on the other side. And heavy head number 2. Well, that's not bad. I was expecting tons of rust in here, but I don't see that. I bet we can get this thing to turn over. Before I show you the other side, we're going to spray a little
penetrator
on this cylinder, try to break up some of this
penicillin
so that perhaps, well, this one sucks. Perhaps, it's a pretty old can. Perhaps we can get this thing to turn over with ease. Now, these cylinders look pretty good. And with this piston at the top of the bore, I don't suspect there'll be any rust beneath it. So it's just one cylinder that has rust. Let's go look at that other cylinder head. Well, we can get the head gasket off. I don't see any problems there. That looks good. Head doesn't look bad. I don't see anything jumping out at me. Time for our test. I don't suspect any issues here. They're a little loose at the bottom of the bore. It's pretty normal. Wait, did that just move? No. I think everything's fine. Now I'm going to try to clean this up. I don't want to do this, but I need to. It's not really that rusted compared to many we've seen. I don't know that that would be enough to keep this thing from turning over. We're going to try to turn this over in a minute. Let's give it a little WD. And some Brillo pad. Just trying to break this stuff up. Give it the best chance it's got. Okay. Now without the valve train, this may turn over a little easier. So let's give that a shot. Nope. Nope, I'm going to break the bolt off in the crank. Now we'll get the lifters out of it, the crank pulley off, timing cover, we'll try to get the cam out, and maybe we'll have better luck then. Now, let's see how easy these come out. They come right out so far. There's a lot of water in this valley. The lifters are pretty ugly looking, but I don't think any of them have bad rollers. They're just rusty. It's just the moisture exposure that makes them look so bad. They all roll pretty nice. I don't see any issues of oiling yet. Everything looks to be all right. Just wet. Not nearly as big as an LS, which is why I was scared to break it off. All right, hopefully this little guy will be enough to take it off. No. Yeah. Next, I'll peel the timing cover off. Nope, not going to pull by that. Blue. There's nothing to pry off of. There we go. Timing cover looks good. Gigantic chain. That's awesome. Let's pull the cam gear. Look at that. Too bad it's so short. Next, a couple of T30s on the cam retaining plate. And we are ready to pull the cam. Oh, that's not going to work. Well, it turns over to a point. Yeah, we'll get her out. Got a couple of long bolts for my bolt bin. I'll act like a handle to pull this cam out. Oh, wait. I can't do that yet. I'm missing a step. I need to pull this out. That drives the oil pump. Seems to be in pretty good shape. Okay, now I should be able to slide this cam out. I've given this cam a brake clean bath because I wanted to see what was damaged and what was just dirt. And there's quite a lot of pitting on this cam from the moisture exposure, but that's not the bad part. That's the bad part. Starting to shave away part of that lobe. I think that's the only one like it. But either way, this cam is best as a core or scrap, especially with all the pitting and the damage to that one lobe. But the journals, they look nice. Well, I looked, and I shouldn't have looked. Well, first off, the cam bearings don't look too terrible, at least the ones that I can see. However, look at that main bearing. That's bad. That's a pretty bad sign when there's metal hanging out of the main bearing, the front main. That is bad. You don't want to see that on your engine. Now I'm going to attempt to drain the oil. It aims a direction. Oh, it's loose already. It aims a direction that's not really conducive with this engine stand. So I'm going to hold on to this pan so I don't make a mess on my floor. That's not oil. It's liquid, not oil. And it's not really liquid either. It's kind of liquid. We're just going to put that back in and pretend we didn't look there. See if we can get this oil filter off. Yeah. Oh, it's bone dry. It doesn't even look like it's been used. I mean, it looks old on the outside, but the inside looks clean. I'll cut this open later. In an effort to mitigate any fluid on my floor, I am just going to unbolt the oil pan in this position so that I can pour its contents out. Oh, not good. That is not confetti. There's not a party happening in this crankcase. It looks like there might have been one coming soon, but the engine locked up instead. That is all bearing fragments. Big chunks too, not the finely powdered kind. And then of course, that. All right, now it's time to make a real big mess. Hopefully not, but let's be realistic. Wait a minute, I got an idea. I'll just hold it. What's the worst that could happen? That wasn't too bad. So there's a few more specks of bearing. Just some typical varnish. Those are not chunks of bearing. It's actually oil droplets. It looks like metal, but it's just oil. I don't see anything else terribly wrong. So I guess the next thing to do is to pull this windage tray and the oil pump. Let's do the oil pump first. Well, that's not disconnected. I thought maybe there's a problem here. Although that seems like it's bent. Maybe not. It does wiggle a little bit. Oh, this does come apart. More flecks of bearing. All over the place. Wow, looks awfully dry in here. So this looks pretty dry. I don't see any, there's like nothing bent or broken. And the only signs we really have besides all these bearing fragments is again what this main bearing looks like, which, ooh, that's going to be bad when that comes apart. I think what I'm going to do before I attempt to get the crank to turn over before I try to take the rods and pistons out is I'm going to loosen all the main caps. Since we know we have a problem here, I'm going to loosen all the main caps, and we're going to see if the crank will turn over, because I can get to the front two, these two, one of these. So there's two that I would really struggle to get. I mean, I think I could get that one loose, but that one right there is going to be a no. So let's loosen these main caps and see where that gets us. And now I'll put the crank bolt back in it and we'll give it a go. Please. Oh, yes. That also sounded terrible. All right, now I'll get the rods and pistons out that I can get out. And then once I get to a point where I got all of those out, we'll take all the main caps off, see if I can get the final two. You know what? That is going to be the rusty one. Let's see if I can't turn the crank over. Nope. We're going to try that, but I have my doubts. I feel like it's just going to push the crank out of its journals. Yeah, that's going to be a no. Let's just try giving it a little bit of a... All right, well, the bearing is trying to walk itself out, so there's definitely some room there. We're moving. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, you could damage the crank with these studs on the rod touching the journal on the crank. You're right, but the crank's not good. I already know that. Not because I can see in the future, but because I can see the main bearing in fragments all over the place. We'll still do our best. And it's gone. Well, we've cleared the crank journal. Still got some to go. Almost at the top of the bore. Oh, we're crowning. And we're out. Time for the next two. I don't know if I can get that one out because of the position of the crank. Let me see if I can't turn this over a little bit. I guess it doesn't really matter. Oh, yes. I'm actually going to see if I can rotate this far enough to bring the next two to the top. Almost. Look at that. 2 more. Let's see if we can get those to the top. Oh, it feels so grindy. But it did it. The rod bearings actually look pretty good, but don't look at this one. That one had some moisture sitting in it in the crank journal. That looks really bad. But that's not from this end. That's not this engine's fault. At least I don't believe it. The rest of these look really good. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. What if these were replaced? We obviously know that there's some main bearing problems, but then I look at these and I don't know if that'll focus on this. Let's try this in a second. 2 of 03. These are original bearings. They have not been replaced. So those are the original bearings, and they are in really good shape. Now the rods have some scale, some rust, because we know that there was moisture in the crankcase for quite some time. All the pistons seem to look pretty good, but there is some skirt wear. Yeah, actually that one's pretty bad. Yeah, they're all pretty bad actually. These would not pass our test here. So these would make good desk ornaments. But I don't know that I would reinstall these. You know, if the coating's gone, it's one thing, but to have the grooves, that's another. That one's even worse. That one's not so bad. Some are worse than others, but I didn't see any other damage to the rods or pistons. Let's get the rest of these bolts loose all the way so we can remove the main caps. Let's see here. Okay, well they are already loose. All right, let's remove the first one. I think this is going to be the worst. Oh yeah, that's no good. It sure looks like that bearing has spun. But to be fair, I did turn the crank over with the main cap loose, so maybe that did it. Let's peel this back, shall we? Uh-huh. Bad. What lies behind cap number 2? That's not good either. Look at the temperature, the discoloration there. That got hot. Let's see, can we get the bearing out? No. The bearing is... We'll get that off later. And cap number 3. Nope, that doesn't come off either. Number 4. Oh, that's bad. And finally, the rear. Nope, we're going to give it a help here. Well, that isn't too bad. Now, let's see if we can remove the crank. I'm hoping it just comes right up. Oh, man. This thing was a bearing mill. I don't understand it, though. Why the mains? Look at all the material that's not supposed to be here. That is pretty bad. All right, let's start to pull some other bearings off of here. Ooh. Those two are fused. I don't think I can get these off my hand. Nope, definitely not. Same is true here. I can probably get this shell off. Look at all that metal on there. Oh, that's pretty ruined. It's pretty ruined. It's very ruined. Now it's time to attempt to remove the rest of these bearing shells. I think we can do this. And I think, by I think I mean hope. Oh yeah. Wow. Oh, that one's very, very on there. Wow. I feel like I'm driving through the mountains and I come around a turn and see a great view, but instead it's a destroyed bearing shell. Just two more. Oh, that was violent. Can I get this one off by hand? Yeah. Wow. It's not good, guys. Not good at all. Well, this crankshaft has seen better days. Every main journal, with the exception of the thrust journal, is bad. And it looks like that hole's partially clogged. I can still see daylight through it, so it can't be that bad. Look at all the material transfer. It's all really, really quite terrible. And that one too. But all the rod journals are perfect. That doesn't make any sense to me. If someone could explain why the rods look good and the mains are wiped out, that would be great. But that main, that looks good. It's also got a lot of surface area. And you can also tell that with the bearing shells. This is just wrecked. This is the worst set of mains I think we've ever seen. Ever. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But they are done. These appear to be original bearings as well. Look at all that. It's insane. I mean, we've seen worse rod bearings because those get beat to death, but these are just so impressive for main bearings. Now, I did slice this filter open. I haven't looked at it yet. So we're going to remove this. I think we're going to remove this. Yes. Well, there's the spring. Now, with the damage of this engine, I expect it to be chock full of metal. But I don't see any. Now, this has definitely had some oil run through it. It is wet. It's not a brand new filter. But there's literally no chunks of bearing in here at all. It's almost like it was run out of oil because it would have to circulate. It would have to have oil to circulate. And there's literally nothing in these pleats that would lead me to believe there's a problem with this engine. All the metal that is actually making it onto these pleats is from my gloves. Yeah, this filter looks fine. I don't understand. I know what you guys are saying already. Take the oil pump apart. Okay. All you got to do is ask. We didn't need that anyway. Well, there's not really anything to go wrong in here. And it's not in terrible condition. Let me pick up the piece that fell. So there's definitely some wear on this housing, but it's not like it's destroyed. The tips of the gears are in good shape. I don't get it yet. It must have been run without oil, but why would the rods be okay and the mains bad? Is that what fails first? Well, this view gives us a much better look at the cam bearings, and they look nice. Better than almost all of the LSs I've ever torn down. Don't mind all that material there. Let's take a look at these bores. So this one definitely has its share of rust. It's not as bad as we've seen. We've seen a lot worse rust on this channel. The rest of these, a little bit of vertical wear, but you can definitely see there's some there. Not as much on that cylinder. Yeah, there's some more right there. It's not perfect, but I bet it would clean up pretty well. There's some deeper scratches there. It may need 10 over to clean all this up. I don't know if that's worth it on these. I don't do a lot of big block stuff, so I don't know what the market is on them. I know the engines, when they're good, do sell really well, but they usually go back into a big block truck and not into something else. When I first started taking this engine apart, I got this overwhelming fear, this feeling of deja vu from the last big block Chevrolet I tore down, a 454, where I had to beat the daylights out of the rods and pistons to get them out of the block. Everything was rusted shut. Everything fought me. Thankfully, I pulled the first cylinder head, and it looked like only one cylinder really had any kind of rust, and it was nowhere near any of the cylinders from that last engine. So it came apart relatively easily, but I don't know what happened here. I'm going to just come out and say I have no idea how this engine failed. I have some theories, maybe. Maybe it was run without oil, but the filter was wet. All of the rod bearings look good. All the cam bearings look good. It did have a little bit of damage to one of the cam lobes, but I think this was a higher mileage engine judging by the condition of everything. So that's not really too surprising. But how did it trash all of the main bearings? I don't know. So you guys tell me. There are some of you that watch these videos that have been wrenching longer than I've been alive, and I have a lot to learn from you, so please leave a comment. Let me know what you think happened to this engine, and if you catch this video after a few days, there's a good chance the answer will be in the comments, because collectively everyone knows way more than one guy. That's just how it always is. There's not a single person that knows everything. This engine came apart pretty well. It's got a lot of good parts on it. So if you'd like to buy any of the parts from this engine or anything else I've torn down, or off of this completely stock, never modified 99 C5 with a 6-speed. It's bone stock, I swear. It's stock. I love it. It's stock, I swear. I'm going to leave our email in the video description. You can also go to importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've been uploading our parts cars just about every single week. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown as always. I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.
All right, now I'm going to smash the car.
Sorry, water pump lovers.